Alright guys, we're going to talk about chapter 22, which is the rights of the accused. So the vocabulary for this one. Accused is someone who has been charged with breaking the law. Defend means to try to fight the charges. So if you get accused of an armed robbery and you go to trial and you're fighting the charges, you are the defendant. Commit means to actually do the act. Confess means to admit to breaking a law. A suspect is someone who the police believe has committed a crime. That does not necessarily mean they did it, but it means the police believe they did. And a felony is a very serious crime. Misdemeanors are minor, felonies are serious. So the 5th, 6th, and 8th Amendments all have parts in them to protect you once you're accused of a crime. Think back to like when you've watched an episode of Law and Order or something like that.
Stand back. My partner and I will go in first. It's our call. Ready? Go. Hey! Which one of you is Jack Curry?
Yes, Jack.
You're under arrest for the murder of Bobby Holland. Put your hands on top of your head. Now! Check it out. Get up! Get up! Spread the legs! You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say may be used against you in a court of law. Hands up. Get your hand! You have the right to an attorney. If you cannot afford an attorney, one will provide it for you at no cost. Let's go.
The police come to the door and they take somebody to jail. Usually they tell them a couple of things before they take them to jail, but we'll get into that a little bit later. So suppose one day the police come to your door and they say that somebody was robbed the night before and the robber looked like you. The police want to ask you some questions, and they are free to ask you questions. They're free to ask you, what you were doing last night, and you can cooperate if you want to, or you can choose not to. You didn't rob anybody, but you're scared, and you're getting kind of nervous because the police are grilling you pretty hard. In fact, you were home alone the night before, and no one saw you, and you didn't talk to anybody. So you have no alibi because you were home by yourself. So the police ask you what you were doing, you say you were by yourself all night. It's going to be a hard story to believe because you have no one who can corroborate the evidence. So, what can happen to you? Nothing can protect you from being accused of a crime. So in America, you can be accused of a crime by pretty much anybody. And nothing can protect you from that part. But things can protect you once you are accused. So the 5th, 6th, and 8th Amendments are set up to protect you once you are accused. You are guaranteed to know what you're being charged with. So if the police come and handcuff you, they're supposed to tell you why you're being arrested. You have the right to a lawyer, and you have the right to remain silent. Remember, the 5th Amendment gives you the right to remain silent to protect yourself from self-incrimination. You have the right to have a fair bail set so you can properly defend yourself in trial. In the United States, everyone has the right to know the charges against you. And that's very important because if you're going to fight the charges, you kind of need to know what you're getting accused of. If the police come and handcuff you and they just say, you know what you did, and they put you in jail, you can't say whether you did it or not because you don't know what you're being accused of. So you have the right to know what you're being accused of, where, when, and how the crime was committed. You also have the right to remain silent, and why that is so important is oftentimes people get scared and they get intimidated into confessing or saying things that might make them sound guilty even when they're not guilty. That's another reason having the right to a lawyer is so important, because a lawyer can be there to help you answer questions and tell you, what to say and what not to say to maybe avoid self-incrimination. Innocent people have sometimes been scared into confessing to crimes they didn't commit. That has happened before, and there's lots of shady stuff that can happen in interrogation, especially if you don't have a lawyer and you're not aware of your rights. Like, imagine being in a situation where you know you didn't commit the crime, but they're telling you if you're found guilty, you're going to spend 25 years in jail. But if you admit you did it, you're going to get 1 year. Some people are going to be willing to confess and take that 1 year just to avoid the chance of taking 25 years. Accused people need the right to a fair bail, and bail is a payment you pay to get out of jail while you're awaiting your trial and while your trial is going on. And having a fair bail set is important because it allows you to get out and properly help your defense to prove that you're innocent. The police can arrest a suspect once they accuse them of a crime. They can stop and question anybody they want without any evidence. So like if you're walking down the street and there was a robbery and the police say, hey, let me talk to you for a second, they're allowed to do that. That's not a violation of the law. The police are allowed to search people too if they have a reason to feel that they are threatened. They can ask for information about a crime, but they cannot make an arrest unless they follow some certain rules. And if the police say, hey, come down to the station with us, you're not under arrest. But if they put you in handcuffs and put you in the car and force you to the station, in effect, you are under arrest. To arrest someone, the police usually need to get a warrant. So what that means, same thing as a search warrant, they have to go to a judge and explain why they think you committed the crime. And then the judge will decide if that's enough for an arrest warrant or not. The warrant must say what law has been broken and give some details about the crime. Sometimes the police can arrest somebody without a warrant, and usually that is if they see you committing the crime. Like if they see you smashing car windows in a parking lot, they don't need to get a warrant. They don't need to get a warrant before they arrest you. They can just arrest you and stop the crime. And there's certain cases where the police will not wait to get a warrant if they have a strong reason to believe like a serious felony or like an act of terrorism is being committed. For lesser crimes, the police must get a warrant for like certain kinds of misdemeanors unless they see the misdemeanor being committed. So let's get into questioning people once they're accused of a crime. If you are accused of a crime and arrested, the police can take your photos, they can take your fingerprints, they can write up the arrest. Before asking you any questions, the police are supposed to make you aware of your Miranda rights. And that's going to be like in Law and Order when you see somebody get arrested and they say, you have the right to remain silent, you have the right to an attorney, anything you say can and will be used against you. You know, those are all parts of your Miranda rights. In Phoenix, Arizona, a warehouse worker named Ernesto Miranda was arrested by the police on a charge of kidnapping and rape. He was picked out of a lineup 10 days after the crime, and after 2 hours of questioning, Ernesto Miranda confessed. He was convicted in court, and during the entire questioning period, the police never once told him that he had the right to remain silent or he had the right to an attorney. So when he finds out about this, he asks for an appeal, and his case goes all the way to the United States Supreme Court. The Supreme Court overturns his conviction, and they say they will no longer hold up convictions of any defendants who were not told of their Miranda rights. So you have the right to remain silent. You have to be warned that anything you say can be used against you. You have the right to a lawyer. And if you can't afford a lawyer, one will be provided. The police must read or tell the Miranda warnings or Miranda rights to someone at the time of the arrest. Without the Miranda rights, any information they get from the suspects can't be used in court as official evidence. There's actually been people who were arrested and not given their Miranda rights, and later, even after they say things that would make them sound guilty, the statements they made prior to their Miranda rights are thrown out. They're not allowed to be used in court. So let's go a little bit more into bail. A person accused of a crime has the right to a fair bail. And bail is money you pay to the court as a promise you will show up for your court date. So if you get accused of a crime, the judge is going to look at your record and see, what you've been in trouble for before and what crime you're being accused of and how much evidence they have against you. They're going to consider all of those things and then they'll set your bail. If you pay the bail, you get out of jail, and you get to go about your life relatively normal until the trial. And then what happens is the trial goes on like normal, and if they find you guilty, then bail can't help you. You're going to jail. So bail is a promise that you're going to show up to court. Once the bail is paid, you get released. But if you do not show up to court and you jump bail, all of that money or the property you put up is forfeited. Bail must be reasonable, and it has to fit the crime. So if you get arrested for stealing $25 worth of food from Dollar General, they can't set your bail at $1 million because it doesn't fit the crime. On the same token, if you're someone who is being accused of murdering 10 people, they can't set your bail at $1,000. The bail has to match the crime and the charges and the evidence. On some occasions, no bail will be given at all. And that is usually only done if they believe the suspect is incredibly dangerous or is a flight risk, which means they might try to run and leave. Okay, so let me tell you another story. In 1960, a guy named Manuel Valtierra was shot and killed in Chicago. The police heard that Manuel and his wife had been having violent fights leading up to this time. At 2:30 a.m., the police arrest Grace, her brother Danny Escobedo, and his friend Benny. They were questioned until about 5:30 p.m. the next day. Finally, a lawyer got them out of jail by using a court order. So these people got arrested, super early in the morning, with not a whole lot of evidence against them, and they were not allowed to see a lawyer. On January 30th, Danny Escobedo was arrested again. He asked for his lawyer, and he refused to answer any questions, which he was allowed to do. When the lawyer came to the station, the police refused to let him see his client. For 5 hours, the lawyer tried to get in to see Danny Escobedo to talk to him, and the police refused. Eventually, the lawyer left. This time, Danny Escobedo was questioned again for hours. Hours and hours and hours, and different stories were told multiple times. One of the officers made a promise. They said that they would let him go home if Danny just told them that Benny actually committed the crime. So, what happens? Another police officer then says, well, your friend Benny is snitching on you. He said you did it. Later, they put the two people, Danny and Benny, in the same room. And when they put them in the same room, Danny Escobedo yells at his friend Benny and says, I didn't shoot him, you did. This was a dangerous statement, and it made them both look guilty. So the police took this as evidence that Danny knew about the murder. And they said, well, since you know about the murder, we're charging you with the murder too. So even though they told him if he made a statement against Benny, he could go home, now they're saying, well, since you knew about the murder, you're guilty. In court, Danny Escobedo's words were used as evidence that he knew about the murder, and the jury believed that he had made these statements on his own free will. They didn't know that the police had kind of played him and manipulated him and primed him to make that statement by saying, Benny said you did it. They ended up finding him guilty and gave him 20 years in jail. His case went to the higher state court, and the first state court he appealed to upheld the conviction, which means it stayed the same. 3 years later, his case reaches the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court decides that his case was not handled fairly. They said when Danny Escobedo was arrested, the police wanted more than information. They wanted him to confess. So instead of trying to find out who did it, they were trying to make it seem like he did it. And the police refused to let him see a lawyer, which is a violation of his Miranda rights. The court said this was unfair, and they decided that Danny Escobedo's constitutional rights had been taken away while he was questioned. The statements he made at the time could not be used as evidence because he was not given, his Miranda rights. The evidence was thrown out, and Danny Escobedo's conviction was overturned, and he was released from jail. Okay, guys, I need you to go into Google Classroom and knock out the worksheet for Chapter 22.